There is a corner of Spain where barely any rain falls all year. A true desert, the only one in Europe. Drive north for a day, and the land turns green and wet, soaked by rain almost every week. Climb into the south, and you find snow deep enough to ski, an hour above a warm sea. How can one country hold all of this at once? That question is the whole of this journey. Spain, a continent pretending to be a country. One country whose highest point, strangely, does not stand on the mainland at all, but we will not reach it until the very end. Our journey begins in the far northwest, in the last corner most people picture when they think of Spain. This is Galicia, a green, misty land the locals call Terra Mega, the land of witches. Here the Atlantic sets the rules. Rain falls through much of the year, and the hills stay green in a way the dry south never sees. The coast does not run in a smooth line. It folds inward into long sea inlets called rias, drowned river valleys shaped almost like fjords, reaching so far inland they turn the shore into one of the richest fishing grounds in all of Europe. More than 1,000 miles of coast, broken into coves, harbours, and floating rafts of mussels. Galicia feels less like Madrid and more like Ireland or Scotland, and that is no accident. The people here trace their roots to the Celts. They play the gaita, a bagpipe you would swear came from the Northern Isles, and they dance to it. On cold nights they still make queimada, a fiery spirit set alight and stirred while someone reads a spell aloud to drive the witches away. Some of it is theatre, some of it they half believe. There is an old Galician saying, "I do not believe in witches, but they do exist." And in one Galician city, Lugo, the Romans left a wall 2,000 years ago that still stands whole, the only complete Roman city wall left anywhere on Earth. But the most famous place in Galicia is not a wall. It is where a very long road finally ends. That road is the Camino de Santiago, the Way of St. James, and for more than 1,000 years it has ended here, in the city of Santiago de Compostela. The name means St. James of the Field of Stars. Legend says that around the year 813, a hermit followed strange lights across a wooded hill and found a forgotten tomb, believed to hold the body of the Apostle James. A cathedral rose over it, and the pilgrims began to come. They have never stopped. Even now, more than 3 million people arrive each year from over 100 countries. Many come on foot, some after walking hundreds of miles across the north of Spain. Some walk for faith, some for grief or silence, or a question they cannot answer at home. When they finally reach the cathedral, many climb the steps behind the high altar to embrace a statue of the saint, the quiet, emotional end of a very long road. Inside hangs the cathedral's strangest treasure, the Botafumero, a giant silver censer as tall as a man, packed with burning incense. 8 men haul on ropes to swing it across the church in a soaring arc until it flies at the speed of a car. Its first purpose was not holy at all. After weeks on the road, hundreds of unwashed pilgrims filled the church with a powerful smell, and the incense was the cure. For some, the walking did not even end here. They pushed on west, to a cape the old world called Finisterre, the end of the earth, to watch the sun drop into the Atlantic at the place where the map once simply stopped. East along the same green coast, the land climbs into the Picos de Europa, the peaks of Europe. The name is old. Sailors crossing the Atlantic home from the New World said these were the first mountains they saw as they neared the coast, the sign that Europe was close. They are limestone peaks and they stand almost on the shore, so near the sea that clouds snag on them and pour rain and snow down their sides. That closeness makes them wild. In 1918, they became the first national park in all of Spain. And to this day, they remain the only Spanish national park where people still live, spread across 11 villages, farming between the peaks as their families have for centuries. It is a hard place to hold on to. In January 2021, a valley here dropped to nearly 36 degrees below zero, the coldest temperature ever recorded in Spain. And the mountains are as harsh below ground as above. They are riddled with caves, one of them dropping nearly a mile straight down among the deepest on Earth. Yet life finds a way in every crack of them. In those cold, damp caves, farmers still ripen a blue cheese, left to age for months in the dark. In the deepest, quietest valleys move two of Europe's rarest animals, the Cantabrian brown bear and the Iberian wolf. And people hold on too. There is a village here, beneath a sheer orange wall of rock, that for decades had no road at all. Its people could reach the outside world only on foot. That changed only in 2001, when a railway was finally cut through the mountain after years of argument among the 25 souls who lived there. 25 people holding out against the mountain. In the last stretch of the Green North, hard against the French border, lives a people unlike any other in Spain, the Basques. Where the wild peaks behind us were shaped by the land, the Basques shaped themselves, holding their ground against every empire that ever tried to claim them. And their greatest wonder is not a mountain or a building. It is a language. Euskera, the Basque tongue, is what scholars call an isolate, a language with no known relative anywhere on Earth. It is older than Spanish, older than French, older than the great family of languages that spread across Europe thousands of years ago. When the Romans arrived, it was already ancient. When Rome fell, it was still spoken. It is the last living language in Western Europe that came before all the others. There is even an old Basque joke. The devil once tried to learn it, gave up after 7 years, and left. The people who speak it are just as old. Genetic studies suggest the Basques are a population apart, descendants of the hunters who lived on this land in the Stone Age, never fully replaced. Their motto is Zazpiak Bat 701, for the 7 Basque provinces spread across 2 countries. As they say of themselves, this is a land that is neither Spain nor France. It is Basque. For centuries, the language was pushed to the margins. Under the dictator Franco, it was barely allowed in public, so people kept it alive in the Choco, private eating clubs where they could still cook, speak, and sing in Basque behind closed doors. Today, that language lives out loud again. Nowhere more than in the old bars of San Sebastian. There, people stand shoulder to shoulder, eating small plates called pinzos, drifting from one counter to the next, a bite and a few words at each. For a people who once had to sing their own tongue behind closed doors, this open, noisy joy is its own quiet victory. Behind them all, to the east, a wall of rock closes the border with France. That wall is the Pyrenees, the great mountain barrier that seals Spain off from the rest of Europe. For nearly 300 miles it runs unbroken from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean, a line of rock and ice so complete that for centuries it kept armies, languages, and weather on their own sides. Here, in the province of Huesca, it rises to its full height, peaks pushing past 3,000 meters, over 10,000 feet. So high that on the tallest of them, Aneto, cling some of the southernmost glaciers in Europe, rivers of ice holding on at the very edge of where ice can survive on this continent. Little else can survive up there. And yet the wall is not quite empty. High above its cliffs, griffin vultures and the rare bearded vulture ride the wind on wings wider than a man is tall. For people, the barrier was almost absolute. For 1,000 years they could cross only where the mountains allowed it, through a handful of high passes. It was over one of those passes that the great pilgrim road to Santiago, the Camino, first crossed into Spain, climbing more than a mile up before dropping down the far side. And near that lonely path, carved directly into an overhanging cliff, hides a monastery. It is so remote that legend says the Holy Grail, the cup of the Last Supper, was kept safe here for over 300 years. This is the wall, but every wall has another side. And just beyond these mountains, in the dry country below, the green north gives way to something almost impossible. Barely an hour from those glaciers, the ground turns to dust. This is the Bardenas Reales, a badland of bare clay and stone in the south of Navarre, so dry and so strange it looks like it belongs on another planet. If the Pyrenees show how much snow one country can hold, the Bardenas show the opposite. Mile after mile of cracked earth where almost nothing grows. Millions of years ago, this was the floor of an inland sea. When the water drained away, wind and rain kept carving the soft clay, cutting it into lonely towers and ridges. The most famous of them, Castells, stands like a crumbling spire alone in the middle of an empty plain. Filmmakers noticed, this Martian landscape has stood in for alien worlds and desert wastelands. The writers of Game of Thrones once thundered across it. And remember, this is still the north of Spain. A dry, empty desert, a short drive from green valleys and permanent ice. Where the Ebro, the largest river in Spain, rolls through a broad plain, stands the city of Zaragoza. For 2,000 years, it has guarded this crossing, and almost every people who ever ruled Spain left their mark on it. Its heart is the Basilica of the Pillar, one of the most important shrines in the Catholic world. The story goes back nearly to the beginning. In the year 40, the Virgin Mary is said to have appeared to St. James on the bank of the Ebro. She left behind a pillar of stone, asking that a church be built on the spot. If the tale is true, it would be the first church ever dedicated to Mary anywhere on earth. The young Francisco Goya, Zaragoza's most famous son, painted one of its great domes in just 60 days. The city keeps stranger memories too. During the Spanish Civil War in 1936, 3 bombs struck the basilica. Not one of them exploded. All 3 are still on display inside, kept as proof of what the people here call a miracle of war. And near the river stands the Aljaferia, an 11th century Muslim palace, its carved arches among the finest left anywhere in the Western world. When the Christian kings took the city, they did not tear it down. They simply moved in. Today it holds the regional parliament, 1,000 years of history still in daily use. East of the Ebro, where the land finally meets the Mediterranean, stands Barcelona. Though the world knows it for the wild curves of Gaudi, its oldest heart is a maze of narrow stone lanes called the Gothic Quarter. Barcelona is far older than Spain itself. 2,000 years ago, the Romans founded a town here called Barcino. And if you know where to look, down a nameless alley in the old city, 4 tall columns still stand. They are the last of a Roman temple to the Emperor Augustus, swallowed inside a medieval courtyard. There is a small trick in the name. Much of what looks medieval in the Gothic Quarter was in fact rebuilt in the early 20th century. It was dressed in old stone to give the city a grander past, just in time for a World's Fair. But the life inside it is real enough. This is the capital of Catalonia, a region with its own language, its own flag, and a fierce sense of itself. More than 7 in 10 people in Barcelona speak Catalan, not a dialect of Spanish but a separate language, banned under Franco and reclaimed the moment he was gone. It is a city that lives late and lives outdoors. Dinner rarely begins before 9. One of its lanes is the busiest walking street in all of Spain, crossed by 150,000 people a day. And on a quiet corner, a restaurant that first opened in 1786 is still serving, older than most countries in the modern world. Above the Barcelona rooftops rises the city's most famous site, a church still unfinished after more than a lifetime, the Sagrada Familia, the masterpiece of the architect Antoni Gaudi. Work began in 1882. It has now gone on for more than 140 years, passed from one generation of builders to the next, and only in 2026 is its tallest tower finally reaching full height. When it does, it becomes the tallest church in the world. And yet Gaudi planned it with a strange humility. He set its highest point 1 meter below the hill of Montjuic, the tallest natural point in the city. He believed nothing built by human hands should ever rise higher than the work of God. In all those years, the building has never taken a single coin of public money. Just as Gaudi wished, it has been paid for entirely by the people who come to see it and the faithful who give, a cathedral raised, stone by stone, out of the pockets of strangers. Gaudi gave his whole life to it. He lived nearby, in a house inside a park he had also designed, and when he died, the church was barely a quarter finished. He knew he would never see it done. He said so himself, and did not seem to mind. His client, he liked to say, was in no hurry. Barcelona is a city where human hands are forever shaping stone. But an hour inland stands a mountain where the shaping was done by something far older. That mountain is Montserrat, and its name means the serrated mountain, a wall of bare rock pillars rising straight out of the flat plain, rounded and strange, like a row of great stone fingers. The shapes are so unlikely that an old legend claims angels carved them with a golden saw to build a throne for the Virgin Mary. If the Sagrada Familia is the temple that human hands are still raising, Montserrat is the one the earth raised first. And it was those strange shapes that drew people to it. Among the pillars sits a Benedictine monastery built high in the folds of the rock. It is home to the patron saint of Catalonia, a small wooden statue of the Virgin known as La Moreneta, the little dark one. Her face is nearly black now, but she did not begin that way. Century after century of candle smoke and aging varnish slowly darkened the pale wood, until the dark Madonna became the face the whole region prays to. And the mountain gives the monastery something you can also hear. Its boys' choir has sung among these rocks since the 13th century, one of the oldest in Europe. Some 50 boys live on the mountain, learning their lessons and their music in the same breath. A few hours south down the coast lies Valencia, a city whose story runs along a river that is no longer there. In 1957, the river Turia burst its banks and drowned much of the city. Afterward, the authorities did the sensible thing and moved the river, carving it a new path around the edge of town. That left a dry riverbed running right through the centre and a plan to pave it into a motorway. The people of Valencia refused. They protested until the plan was dropped, and instead of a highway they got a park, a green ribbon 9 kilometres long, winding through the heart of the city where the water used to run. At the far end of that old riverbed stands Valencia's boldest site, the City of Arts and Sciences. It is a cluster of white, curving buildings that look like the bones of vast sea creatures, and it holds the largest aquarium in Europe. But water shaped Valencia long before it shaped this park. Every Thursday at noon, outside the door of the cathedral, a handful of farmers still gather as the water tribunal. It is a court that settles arguments over irrigation exactly as it has for more than 1,000 years, with no lawyers and no paperwork. It is considered the oldest working court in Europe. That same irrigated water still feeds the rice fields on the city's edge, the fields where farmers, cooking with whatever they had at hand, gave the world paella. Offshore, though, the Mediterranean keeps a secret older than any court. These are the Balearic Islands, Mallorca, Menorca, Ibiza, and Formentera, scattered across the warm sea off the eastern coast. The world knows them for their beaches and their nightlife. Few ever ask why the water is so impossibly clear. The answer is alive, and it lies on the seabed. Beneath these waves grow vast underwater meadows of a seagrass called Posidonia. One meadow near Ibiza has been growing for more than 100,000 years. It is among the oldest living things on the entire planet, older than any city, any language, any monument human hands have raised. And it is this humble grass, quietly filtering the water, that keeps the sea above it clear as glass. The beaches draw the crowds, and the nightlife draws the young, but the true wonder of these islands is the silent, ancient meadow breathing in the dark beneath them. Back on the mainland lies the dry region of Murcia. Here a thin ribbon of land called La Manga, the sleeve, stretches for 14 miles across open water, sealing off a lagoon from the sea behind it. The lagoon is the Mar Menor, the Little Sea, the largest saltwater lagoon in Spain. Held apart from the cold Mediterranean, its shallow water turns warm and heavy with salt. It is so buoyant and so mild that people swim in it deep into the year and coat themselves in its dark mud, said to heal the body. Along its salt pans, worked since Roman times, flamingos gather in the shallows and turn the water pink. Leaving the coast behind, the land climbs inland to a high plateau at the very center of the map, and there sits Madrid. The first surprise is how high up it is. At around 670 meters, it is the highest capital city in the European Union. That altitude gives the city its famous sky: thin, bright winters, fierce blue summers, and around 250 clear days a year. Even that sky can turn strange. A few times a year, a wind called the calima blows in fine dust from the Sahara. It dims the air to a glowing orange, sometimes staining the snow red, a reminder of how near Africa really is. If its height sets Madrid apart, its position explains why it is here at all. The city stands almost exactly at the geographic center of Spain, and that is no accident. A king chose it as his capital in 1561 precisely because it lay in the middle, a heart from which the whole country could be reached. To this day, a small stone slab in the central square marks Kilometre Zero, the point where all 6 of Spain's great roads begin. And from that centre, Madrid lives at its own hours. Its people are nicknamed gatos, cats, for the way they stay up through the night. The city is one of the last in Europe to fall asleep, its streets still full long after midnight. Yet for all those late nights, it guards some of the greatest art on earth. 3 of the world's finest museums stand within a 15-minute walk of one another, holding Velázquez, Goya, Bosch, and Picasso's shattered vision of war, Guernica. An hour south of Madrid, wrapped almost entirely by a bend in the river Tagus, sits Toledo, an island of stone. For centuries, it was the meeting place of 3 faiths. Christians, Muslims, and Jews lived here side by side, praying and trading. And, most remarkably, they translated together, turning the knowledge of the ancient world from Arabic into Latin and passing it on to the rest of Europe. They call it the City of 3 Cultures, a kind of coexistence that few other places on Earth ever managed for so long. You can still read that history in the stone. A synagogue built in the 12th century for the Jewish community by Muslim craftsmen stands as one of the oldest left anywhere in Europe. The great cathedral, the second largest in Spain, rose on the site of a Visigoth church that had become a mosque, and inside hang paintings by El Greco, Titian, Goya, and Rubens. And for more than 2,000 years, Toledo has been famous for one craft above all: steel. The swords forged beside this river armed the soldiers of Rome, and the art of inlaying gold into dark steel, learned from Muslim smiths, carried the name of Toledo across Europe. In the middle of the town of Segovia stands something that, at first, hardly seems real: a wall of stone arches, some 90 feet tall, marching straight through the heart of the city. This is a Roman aqueduct, built around 2,000 years ago to carry water down from the mountains. It is made of some 20,000 blocks of granite, and here is the astonishing part, not one of them is held by mortar. No cement, no glue, nothing binds them at all. They stand only by the precision of their cut and the pull of gravity, each stone pressing on the next, exactly as the Romans left them. It kept water flowing to the city until barely a century and a half ago. The people of Segovia found it so hard to believe that human hands had built such a thing that they told another story. A young water carrier, weary of the climb, made a bargain with the devil to bring water to her door before dawn. And the devil, racing the sunrise, ran out of time, one single stone short. Above the aqueduct rises a castle so graceful, perched on its rock, that it is said to have helped inspire the fairy tale castles of Walt Disney. Further west across the plain rises Salamanca, built almost entirely of a soft golden sandstone that seems to soak up the light. At sunset, the whole city glows warm amber, which earned it the name La Dorada, the Golden One. At its heart is the oldest university in Spain, founded in 1218, one of the oldest in the world still teaching after 800 years. Generations of students have passed through its carved stone gates, and they carry a small superstition. Hidden somewhere in the swirling carvings of the university's facade is a tiny frog, perched on a skull. Tradition says any student who can find it on their own, with no one pointing the way, will pass their exams. Crowds still stand in the square, heads tipped back, searching for it. The city has a sense of humour about its own stone. During a restoration in the 1990s, a mason was allowed to carve something new among the ancient Gothic figures of the cathedral. It was a small astronaut floating in a spacesuit, hidden in plain sight for sharp eyes to find. From this high, dry heartland, the journey now drops south, into the hottest part of Spain, and the land the Moors held for centuries. The first great city of the south is Córdoba, and it holds one of the most extraordinary buildings in the world. From the outside, it looks like a fortress. Step inside and you enter a forest, over 850 columns of marble and stone. They hold up row upon row of red and white striped arches that seem to march away in every direction, without end. This is the Mezquita, begun as a great mosque in the year 785. But its story did not stop there. Over 1,300 years, the building changed hands again and again. A Visigoth church first, then this vast mosque, then, after the Christian reconquest, a cathedral. In the 16th century, the church cut a soaring nave straight into the middle of the forest of arches. When the Emperor Charles V saw what had been done, he is said to have regretted it. "You have destroyed," he told them, "something unique in the world, to build something you could have built anywhere." 1,000 years ago, this city was the brightest in Europe. Under Muslim rule, Córdoba may have held 500,000 people, with 70 libraries and paved, lamplit streets, at a time when London was a town of 20,000. Downstream, where the Guadalquivir grows wide and slow, stands Seville, and its cathedral is the largest Gothic church on the face of the earth. When the builders drew up its plans, more than 500 years ago, they are said to have made a vow. They would raise a church so vast and so beautiful that those who came after would think they had been mad. They succeeded. It covers nearly 3 acres, and for a time it was the largest church in the world. Its bell tower tells the deeper story of the South. It began not as a bell tower at all, but as the minaret of a mosque, finished in 1198, and in its day the tallest tower on earth. Inside there are no stairs to the top, only a wide ramp, built so a man could ride a horse all the way up to call the faithful to prayer. Southwest of the city, where the land finally meets the Atlantic, it dissolves into a vast wetland, Donana. It is a vast wetland of marsh, dune, and shallow water, one of the most important wild places in all of Europe. Twice a year, millions of migrating birds come down out of the sky to rest here on their long journey between Europe and Africa. And in the scrub and the pine woods lives the animal this land is famous for, the Iberian lynx. A short, spotted wildcat with tufted ears and a stubbed tail, it is one of the rarest cats on Earth, and it eats almost nothing but rabbit. 20 years ago, it very nearly vanished. Fewer than 100 were left alive, and the species stood at the very edge of extinction. Then people acted. Slowly, patiently, they brought it back. Today there are more than 1,500 prowling these hills again, one of the great rescues in the history of European wildlife. East of the marshes, up in the White Hill towns, Ronda sits astride a gorge called El Tajo, a sheer crack in the rock nearly 400 feet deep, splitting the town into 2 halves. For most of its history, there was no easy way across. What joins the 2 sides today is the Puente Nuevo, the new bridge, though it is hardly new. It climbs almost the full height of the gorge, and it took 34 years to build. It was not the first attempt. An earlier bridge, thrown up in a hurry, collapsed only a few years after it was finished, killing around 50 people, one of the worst engineering disasters in Spanish history. Inside the great arch of the bridge that finally held, there is a hidden chamber. In gentler times, it held little of note. In the darkest days of the Civil War, it is said to have served as a prison, and some prisoners were thrown from it into the ravine below. Ronda sits among the Pueblos Blancos, the white villages of Andalusia, towns of lime-washed houses clinging to the hillsides, their walls painted white for centuries to throw back the fierce southern sun. But the greatest treasure the Moors left in Spain waits a little further east, glowing red on a hill above the city of Granada. On its hilltop stands the Alhambra, the finest Moorish palace left anywhere in the world. Its name comes from the Arabic for the Red Fortress, after the warm red clay of its outer walls. But inside those plain walls lies something delicate almost beyond belief. Courtyards of slender columns, ceilings carved like honeycomb, and everywhere the sound of running water. That water is its quiet miracle. The palace sits high on a hill, where water will not flow by itself. So the Moorish engineers brought it down from the snows of the Sierra Nevada through a long system of channels, using nothing but the natural slope of the land. No pumps, no machines, just gravity, feeding fountains and pools that have not run dry in 700 years. To the people who built it, this cool, green, water-fed palace was a vision of paradise on earth. And then they lost it. In 1492, the last Muslim ruler of Spain handed over the keys of the Alhambra to the Catholic monarchs, closing nearly 800 years of Moorish rule. Rising straight behind Granada stand the Sierra Nevada, the snowy range, the roof of mainland Spain. Their highest peak, Mulhacen, rises nearly 3,500 meters, some 11,000 feet, and snow clings to its heights long into summer, the southernmost lasting snow in all of Europe. Here is where the promise from the very beginning of our journey comes true. On the right day in spring, you truly can ski down fresh snow in the morning, drive for about an hour, and swim in a warm sea by the afternoon. The southernmost ski resort in Europe sits barely 30 kilometers from the city of Granada, while the Mediterranean coast lies about 70 kilometers the other way. Snow and warm sea, almost within sight of each other. That coast, sheltered by the mountains, is so mild it has earned the name the Tropical Coast. It is one of the only places on the European mainland where farmers grow avocados, mangoes, and custard apples in the open air. And between the two, on the southern slopes, cling the Alpujarras, more than 50 white villages scattered across the folds of the range. It was here that the last Muslims of Spain took refuge after Granada fell, and here, in the thin, cold mountain air, that the highest village in the country still cures its famous ham. A little to the east, past the last of the green, lies the Tabernas Desert, the only true desert in mainland Europe. Here it barely rains, less than 9 inches in a year, less than parts of North Africa, and the ground bakes bare and gold under a sun that shines around 300 days a year. That endless sun made it famous in an unlikely way. Half a century ago, filmmakers realized this corner of Spain looked exactly like the American Wild West, and it was far cheaper to film in. So Hollywood came to the Spanish desert. More than 300 films have been shot here. It was in these hills that the spaghetti western was born. And it was here, on a shoestring budget, that a little-known television actor named Clint Eastwood rode into the role that made him a star. To this day, mock cowboy towns still stage gunfights in the dust for visitors. But the strangest thing about this desert is what people have done to its edge. To grow food in a land with almost no rain, they covered the plains in a vast sea of plastic greenhouses. There are tens of thousands of them, so many that the white sheeting can be seen from space. And in some villages nearby, people still live as they long have, in cool homes carved directly into the soft rock. Snow 1 hour, desert the next, and still the country is not finished. Beyond the mainland, out in the Atlantic, its strangest chapter is only beginning. Far out in the Atlantic, closer to the coast of Africa than to Spain itself, lie the Canary Islands. They are not made of ordinary land. Every one of the 8 islands was built by volcanoes, and this is the only part of Spain where volcanoes still erupt in modern times, the last as recently as 2021. On the island of Lanzarote, the volcanoes left almost nothing to farm. No soil, no shelter, just black ash and stone, and a wind that never stops. And yet the people here grow wine. To do it, they dig a shallow pit down into the volcanic ash for each single vine and build a low, curving wall of black stone around it to break the wind. The result is one of the strangest farmlands on earth, a vast field of black hollows, each cradling one green plant. The trick is the ash itself. It drinks the night mist and holds the moisture down at the roots in a place that almost never sees rain. Nearby lies the raw power that made all of this. In the 1730s, Lanzarote erupted for 6 years without stop, burying a quarter of the island. Even now, only a few meters underground, the rock still burns so hot that park keepers pour water into a hole and it bursts straight back out as a jet of steam. Nearby, a restaurant grills its food over nothing but the heat of the earth. Further west across the archipelago lies Gran Canaria, an island they call a continent in miniature. It is green and wet in the north, dry in the south, with pine forests on its peaks and, at its southern tip, a true desert of golden dunes. The dunes of Maspalomas roll right down to the Atlantic shore, a piece of the Sahara that seems to have drifted across the sea and come to rest between a palm grove and the waves. Travelers still cross them on the backs of camels, as if they had wandered into North Africa by mistake, which, in a sense, they nearly have, for Africa lies only about 100 kilometers away. That nearness runs deeper than the sand. The first people of these islands, the Guanches, arrived here over 2,000 years ago, sharing their roots with the Berbers of North Africa. They lived much as desert peoples did, dwelling in caves and herding goats. The largest island of all is Tenerife, and its western coast falls into the ocean in one tremendous drop. These are the cliffs of Los Gigantes, the Giants, a wall of dark rock up to 600 meters high, nearly 2,000 feet. They plunge straight down into the Atlantic along 6 miles of coast, among the tallest sea cliffs in Spain. The Guanches who lived here called them the Wall of Hell and believed them to be the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The best way to feel their scale is from the water below, and there is good reason to go there. The deep sea at their feet is one of the finest places in Europe to watch whales and dolphins, which gather in these warm Atlantic waters all year round. Behind the cliffs, hidden in the folds of the mountains, an old village clings to the walls of a plunging gorge, reachable only on foot. And above it all, filling the whole center of the island, rises the mountain we have been climbing towards since the very first minute of this journey. It is Mount Teide, and it is the answer to the riddle we began with. The highest point in all of Spain does not stand on the mainland at all. It stands here, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, a volcano rising 3,700 meters into the sky. But that is only the part you can see. Measured from its true base on the ocean floor, Teide climbs some 7,500 meters. That makes it the third tallest volcano on the entire planet, after only the great volcanoes of Hawaii. Each morning at sunrise, it performs a quiet trick of scale. The mountain casts an enormous triangular shadow clear across the sea toward the horizon, one of the largest shadows any mountain on earth can throw. The Guanches feared this peak. They believed an evil god named Guayota lived inside it, and that the eruptions were his doing, and they lit fires on the mountain to drive the darkness back. Now, from its summit, the whole journey lies behind us. Every desert and snowfield, every city and shore, every language and border we have crossed. And from up here, one truth is finally impossible to miss. We began by asking how a single country could hold so much. A desert and a snowfield, a green Atlantic coast, and a warm southern sea. A language older than Rome, and a church still unfinished, mountains, marshes, and islands of fire. Perhaps the answer is that Spain was never really one thing. It is a gathering of worlds that history and geology pressed into the same borders and never quite blended, each corner still keeping its own language, its own weather, its own memory of the past. And through all of it, people stay. They farm the ash, cure ham in the mountain cold, judge water on a Thursday as their grandfathers did, and hand an unfinished cathedral down to their children. We have crossed a continent and never once left a single country. If this land is your home, tell us in the comments what we missed, because there is always more. Thanks for traveling with us, and we will see you on the next journey.